Hello.
Hello, Dom.
Hey, Billy. How you doing?
Good, man. It's been forever. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Just hanging around here. Yeah, man. Just I'm doing good in general, though.
Good. Holy shit, it's been a while since I talked to you.
Yeah, man. It's probably been about I mean, probably 3 or 4 years, and I think that was when I sent you that little text, just seeing how you're doing on the road.
Yeah, and I came and saw you when you played in Nashville a few years ago. We didn't really get a chance to like hang or nothing, but I did catch one of your solo shows or duo shows actually.
Yeah, that's right. That was trying to think of what that venue was, because
I can't remember either. It was
it wasn't the Third and Lindsley.
it was
It
so-
was.
it, that's what I wanted to say too, but it wasn't that. It was something else.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember. I can't remember what that. I can't remember what the name of that venue was. Yeah, that was a nice time. Yeah, yeah. You came down, and Carl Johnson came down. Great banjo player, in Collierville, and yeah, that was a great time. But yeah, it's been a bit though. It's been a little bit. You've been around the world a few different times since I've seen you.
Yeah, I've been busy, man. Got a little band together and been playing a bunch of shows. And holy smokes, it's been fun. Yeah, I remember like the first time I really met you was at Folk Alliance. It must have been like probably like 7 or 8 years ago now.
Well, that was 2014. I remember that one very well. And I definitely have been keeping up because I remember when I first met you, I thought this fellow here has a great talent, and I'll be interested to see how the world takes it when they get a chance to really sit down and listen to him. And it's been wonderful seeing your achievements and all the different places you've been able to perform. And yeah, man, I'm just one of those guys that's glad to say I knew you when.
Well, we had a good time at that Folk Alliance, and yeah, it was good to meet you and get to play some music there. And you also sort of tripped me out with you know, you told me so many great stories and stuff just in that little time while we were hanging out. And man, you're such a knowledgeable fella, especially when it comes to music and old time music and stuff. It was really a kick, especially for me back then. Because I was like even younger and more eager and just trying to soak everything up like a sponge and just like so I had like heard about you. My friend Caroline Barlow, actually, who's from North Carolina, told me about the Carolina chocolate drops, and that's how I first kind of heard about you guys. The one thing I always went back to was cornbread and butter beans, and at the Blue Plate Special, this YouTube video that's out there, and I just got stuck watching that. So I was already a fan, by the time I met you there in Kansas City.
Oh yeah, man. Well, it's been a beautiful journey, but like they say though as well, it's been a long, strange trip out
Yeah.
out there. My trajectory into music and getting all the way up to this conversation here has been it's been a combination of being a humbling journey because in one way, since I started out as a fan of the music, and that was why I started playing the music, was I was interested because I was a fan in Phoenix, Arizona. There weren't a lot of people playing that type of music around me, so I was searching and I was trying to find any of the old time music being played live, because after a certain point I heard the records and I really enjoyed the records, but I was always looking for those moments when I would have a little chance to hear the old time music being played. And so for me, when I went out to North Carolina for the very first time, I found an opportunity in the way that when I went to the Black Banjo Gathering in 2005, up to that point, you may not know this about me, but I studied English, and I got a Bachelor of the Arts, a BA in English and ancient literature. So I was studying folk music and folklore, as
Oh wow.
well as studying ancient literature from Chaucer and Shakespeare and all those things. So when I
Wow.
just came out to North Carolina, I was out on a mission to document the new folk revival as I saw it growing from basically from "Oh Brother Where Art Thou," from Johnny Cash's American recordings, and also Tom Waits and many of his like Mule Variations and Rio Gone. I just started noticing young people starting to play more old timey music after those types of projects, and there are quite a few of them that came out in the early, mid, and late '90s, going into the early 2000s. But I started to see the movement. I saw Old Crow Medicine Show. I heard them on a listening station in 2004. And when I heard "Tell It to Me," their version, I knew that a revolution was coming. Because I was part of that revolution. I was playing the music, but I had no one to talk to or play the music with. And I found different small groups here and there to play with. But it wasn't something that was in the mainstream. And so when I came out to North Carolina, I I was at the Black Banjo Gathering and I saw that there needed to be an expansion of the representation of African American music within the history of old time and folk and country music. I mean, also
Oh
with
yeah.
blues, and jazz, all of those things have folk roots. And since I had studied all of these things, both doing it in school as a literature person, but then also moonlighting at the library and learning about it on my own, listening to some wonderful recordings from Folkways to Arhoolie to whatnot, I started to bring those ideas together and tried to update the history so it would be more representative. And that was, I happened to meet up with, Rhiannon Giddens and Justin Robinson, and we started the Carolina Chocolate Drops. I implemented those ideas. It was halfway a social experiment. What happens when you bring an African American string band into the American consciousness again? What does that mean? All the implications with the history. What happens? And it's
Hell
been
yeah.
amazing. I mean, the reverberations out off of it have been amazing. So we did that for 9 years, and then for me, I'm like my mentor Mike Seeger. I'm endlessly searching for new types of music and reinterpretation of that music. So for me, when I meet people like yourself, Billy, I try to convey as much as I can to the interests of the people I meet. And that's something that people like Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie, Brownie McGee, and Sonny Terry, Leadbelly, all of these people did this. They had the music, the culture within them, and then they had to convey that to the next generation. And once it's conveyed through a one-to-one person, then that person that receives the message, they can take it any way they want, and that's one of the most important things. So for me, I feel like I'm in a long line of interpreters and scholars that have presented the music and tried to get it out there for others to do what they will.
Yeah, man. That's
Yes.
amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, you tripped me out even that, because again, I've had a lot of wonderful experiences. I've got to meet a lot of people that I truly admired before I became a professional musician. And the other day you had that picture of you and Molly Tuttle, and you were wearing the R. Crumb T-shirt that I was selling on tour for a long time. And I think back on those moments, being able to play gigs with R. Crumb and being able to chat with him about this, that, and the other. And yeah, it's a beautiful life we live.
It is, and especially in this time where we're all sort of home, it's so evident that just how lucky we are to get to do what we get to do and to travel and to meet people and to play music and make friends and just to do all that. It's can't wait till I can run into you at a festival again. Man, I just I just remembered seeing you at Folk Alliance. You had like like all these folders and magazines and notebooks and about six guitars in your hands and banjos and shit, dude. I don't know if you remember that, but you look like you could have used a little cart or something for all your instruments.
That's funny. It's that year was an interesting year. In 2014, I guess it was mid-January, and I was in Australia, and I woke up at my hostel where I was staying, and it came to me in a flash that it was the year of the folk singer. And I had been seeing the way that popular music and the digital media was coming in and really swelling up around all of culture. And I started to realize that we were in a very crucial moment, like in the same way that the Lomaxes or any of the folklorists, that many times they're preserving the older styles because uh, they are in danger of being extinct because of progress in one form or another, and that's everything from, I remember when you had to send a check in the mail to buy something like through a catalog. Now, no one does that anymore for the most part because we do that on the internet. But
Mm-hmm.
it was sort of thing where I started to see digital technology and media was influencing the way people learn songs. It was influencing the communities that were creating the music and the ones that were preserving the music in one form or another. And so the Year of the Folk Singer came to me in a flash because it told me that I I as one individual needed to let other individuals in my community, which is folk music, which is a lot of different people and a lot of different genres, to let them know they needed to make sure their voices were heard when the big digital changeover happened. And so I was on a one-man journey to show everything I could to anybody who I knew and let them know that they needed to activate their communities so that they would not be washed over in the big digital changeover. And I named it the Year of the Folk Singer. And my big confirmation that this needed to happen was that Pete Seeger then passed away at the end of January 2014. And to me, the role that Pete Seeger played as a cultural institution was important because he also played traditional songs, original songs, and he was a very multifaceted uh, icon within the folk music community and the political and social community as well. And so when I saw that he passed away, I saw that there was a void that needed to be filled. And so I just tried to do my part as a single individual, as a citizen, to spread the word so that everybody could share their stories individually. And I feel that there have been some voices that have been able to get out there, but of course, this is a like Pete used to sing many years ago. Freedom is a constant struggle. You constantly have to try to build that culture and get it out there in the world. And so, yeah, that's why I had all those notebooks and things because that year at Folk Alliance, they had a lot of the legacy artists from Jackie Washington, Tom Rush was there, Josh White Jr., um, a Chuck Mitchell, who was it was Joni Mitchell's ex-husband, but he was a prominent folk club owner. And I had these books ready for these different individuals, and I had them sign this book because I knew it was a moment where they'd all be getting together, and I knew it was a special moment to be able to capture that. So I had books like "Baby, Let Me Follow You Down," which was written by Eric von Schmidt, and it's a compendium of the oral history of Club 47 in Harvard Square. And so I was carrying that around so people got to see pictures of themselves 50 years ago, and they signed it. And of course, there was my own personal gratification of having my book signed by these wonderful performers and artists, but also they got to see that I appreciated them too. And
Right.
I brought LPs around because I knew certain people were going to be around as well. So I had them sign some of their classic records, and it just let them know they need to be appreciated. And that was the heart of the Year of the Folk Singer. It just was one of these ideas that, many of these different performers, artists, and artisans. They've done their work for so many years, and it whether they were commercially viable in a in a traditional sense is irrelevant. Many of them have these beautiful memories and stories of what they uh, did in all their years of making music. And so I just wanted to activate that and engage that and also let them know that's appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time I got to meet uh, Odetta, for example, and that was around 2007. I was in Eureka Springs, Arkansas with the group, and we opened for her. And I just took a moment to just ask her how she was doing, and also took a moment to ask her about, Leadbelly and Pete and just some of the old days. And she just loved the fact that I, as a young person, wanted to hear some of these old stories because for many folk singers and roots musicians, a lot of times they don't get to see the influence they've left on the younger generations. And so that's something I've always tried to do in general. And yeah, this year of the folk sing was a big time for that. I did that for 365 days, and then I told everybody the year of the folk singers every year. So go out there, you know.
Yeah, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, and you're part of that, man. You're part of that new wave of people that came in, and just for many years, it was very hard for the folk music community to see that there was going to be a new, stronger wave of people. Also, especially with traditional music, because just to spotlight you a little bit, Billy. I mean, the fact that you can switch between, something like Brown's Ferry Blues, which you do a great version that any fan of Doc or any of the great guitar pickers would love. But you can also turn around and then do very, experimental jamming music that's like Yonder Mountain, or is like any number of groups that are just more progressive in the sound, the harmonic structures, and then also jamming and taking it to the next level. So it's
Yeah, I learned by pretty much listening to Doc. I mean, that's how I started playing guitar and all that. But later on, I got into rock and roll and metal and all sorts of different stuff. So I have all these different influences, really. And whenever we get on stage, somewhere along the line, I got really into Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead, and that sort of opened up this whole door of freedom in music. Like instead of being tied to the melody or anything like that, just kind of improvising and going off on those little journeys like you're talking about. And that stuff's really fun for me. However, I never really play a show without playing, some of those old tunes like you're talking about, or playing just some straight up bluegrass because, I mean, that's where it's at. It's also kind of cool to freak people out and play some big, wicked, crazy psychedelic stuff, and then play like "How Mountain Girls Can Love" or something really straightforward. And they're like, "Wait a minute, these guys. He uses pedals, but wait, he can pick."
Well, I always love keeping them guessing. As a performer, that's one of the things that's the greatest strength a performer has, is keeping the audience guessing. However that might be. Whether it's the songs you play, or sometimes people do it with the way they look, or whatnot, or different things. But just to be able to switch between those styles, yeah, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
I've seen you play so many different styles of music within the stuff that you do. I mean, your original songs are great. You when you do, like old cowboy songs or anything like that, you embody this such a spirit of it. It's like the emotion of the song and almost even the time of the some of those songs is it really comes across, at least for me, when I hear you play, and I really appreciate that. Just the something that I've always tried to work on as a musician is the just appreciating the song and kind of giving the song the amount of respect that would, then it would, the emotion would come across in the right way. And you have a really, really great way of doing that, like Old Paint. Man, I love hearing you do that one.
oh yeah, yeah. Goodbye Old Pain is an interesting one because that one is a combination of uh, a lot of uh, a lot of ideas that I wanted to implement into a song arrangement in combination with things I had read about the song itself. Because especially when it comes to a lot of traditional music, like Goodbye Old Pain is a song that a lot of people have done. Many people have done it. I mean, it's been done. I mean, thousands of times. And for me, when I wanted to put it together for the Black Cowboys record, I went back to the field recording that was made by Jess Morris in the late 1940s. It was recorded by John Lomax. And I noticed that the song was in the key of E flat, which is really one of my best keys for doing like blues shouting. And I do my song Till the Seas Run Dry in E flat.
Hmm.
And so when I heard it was in that key and I started to work on it, I straightened it out a little bit because Jess Morris he does a different melody for every single verse of his original field recording. So instead of doing that, I straightened it out a little bit, and I noticed that it was mostly a one chord song with a couple of occasional changes and a beautiful minor chord within it. And so when I started to put the song together, I wanted to think about a cowboy out on the range. And for me, a lot of it is like a character acting, just like I don't know, any type of good character actor that you might think of in a movie. I always try to go deep into the emotional spaces that a song conveys. And
Yeah.
Goodbye Old Pete is a very interesting one because it's a ballad in its form. And it is emotional as a narrative song, but it's structured musically like a blues, where the verses are not connected to each other, not by a straight narrative, but the emotional effect of all of the verses coming together is like a blues song. Like the blues, a lot of times they'll have a serious verse and then a joke verse. Like you'll have like if the river was whiskey and I was a diving duck, I dived to the bottom, I'd never come up. That's kind of a little chuckling
Mhm.
uh, joke. Then you might have my baby caught the train and left me all alone. But now I got a pistol long as my right arm. So that's a little more serious. And those things combined together, those create a much bigger emotional experience. So Goodbye Old Paint has that structurally. And then when it came to singing it, I wanted to think about the places that where bluegrass and blues and cowboy song all meet together. And so, as a song in E flat, I found that it made a great little rise in a nice little high lonesome, farewell, fair lady, I'm leaving Cheyenne. And I felt that once I could get that little line, uh, give it a nice bluesy bluegrass touch to it, the song all came together and it fell right into place. And yeah, that one. And then I guess the last thing is I saw Don Edwards at the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering back in, I guess that would be in 2015. And the way he played guitar, that really influenced the way that I came up with that one little lick. Because I wanted it to be kind of Don Edwardsy, but I wanted to also kind of get an African American Afro sort of feel for a one chord song. And I think about people like that I've gotten to play with, like Shekamala Jabate and uh, people like that who play the ngone. So I made this little sort of one, just one little lick that's just a
Yeah.
neat little piece in there. So when I do all of my arrangements, I try to take the method of people like Fats Domino or Chuck Berry, where in one listen you can hear everything. You hear the whole arrangement. You hear the solo, you hear the vocal, you get the story, and you get the feeling out of the one song. And I've always tried to arrange my songs in that way, just because, especially nowadays, I don't know if people are going to sit and listen to a song if they have to wait more than 15 seconds for the meat for
Ye-
the
Yeah.
real gusto. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I try to take the again. This is my influences of 1950s rock and roll. All of those records just boom. They give it to you, and then you
Yeah.
can ride the whole record through. And when I do my song arrangements, even though they're folk music, I always try to think of those ideas when I'm performing them. And yeah, and in terms of literature, there are so many different emotions that can be conveyed. And like I love that you mentioned Goodbye Old Paint specifically because I still don't even know exactly what the song is about. Is the guy happy to go leave Cheyenne, Wyoming? Is he going to see somebody in Cheyenne, or is he going to see someone in the place that he's going? Are the ladies happy to see him go, or are they sending him away? I don't know. Is it like like in El Paso? Is it like one of those things he has to jump on his horse and get away, or is he have a little tear in his eye as he's walking off? And the song gives you no indicators of of how the characters are supposed to feel. It all leaves it to the audience to have a little picture in their head, pop up.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like songs like that. I remember being a little kid and when I was first hearing a lot of those Doc Watson tunes, mostly like him doing Little Sadie or Wild Bill Jones or um, any tunes like that. Wild Bill Jones specifically. When I was a little kid, I had a very visual imagination. I guess you would say. I used to fall asleep sometimes at night, and I would wake up and tell my mom that I was having eyesights.
Huh.
I remember one time, my dad might have been watching like a King Kong movie, and when I was trying to sleep, all I could see is that, uh, King Kong. And I used to call him eyesights. Anyhow, when my dad would play songs like Wild Bill Jones or something, those cowboy songs or stuff like that, it was like, in my head, it was like watching a Western movie or something, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a very in-depth conversation with Peggy Seeger. Sorry, not Pete Seeger, but Peggy Seeger. I had a nice in-depth conversation about this very thing with Peggy Seeger because she was doing a workshop at Elkins College for Augusta Heritage Week one year, and I was there, and I sat in on her ballad class, and she was mentioning that one of the things that's most interesting is that children, that many people would want to censor the more graphic imagery in folk songs, but children actually really love to hear all of these things because it gives them a visual picture in their head. And she was talking about how her kids, like when she would be practicing ballads, the kids would always ask her for the most grotesque ballads of all of them because they wanted that sensation of the grotesque in their mind, like a television show or a drama or something like that. And it's like a picture in your mind. And a lot of those folk songs are like that. And I think that way a lot with folk songs as well. Just I try to think of them as characters and people in a movie. Even when I'm doing my albums, I sequence the tracks so that they are I have a constantly revolving cast of characters. They're literal and sometimes they're not literal, and it gives the ear something. The ear can understand it, even if it's not literal on the actual page. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I've always tried to build my music along those types of lines because another thing is replayability. That's the other thing about the digital age is trying to make records that you can listen to once and twice, if not 100 times. And that's what you really want to try to do.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah.
So, you know, thinking thinking back on that time I saw you carrying all those cases and stuff, you have learned how to play quite a few different instruments. I mean, I know you play banjo and guitar, and but kind of the stuff that I really like is like the fife and the rhythm bones and stuff like that. I mean, that stuff's just killer. I mean, the bones. Man, if we're ever around at a festival or something, you got to come jam some bones and some fife and quills with us and stuff.
Oh yeah, man, that'd be amazing. And that's a funny thing with the bones. The bones are funny because that's something that took me full circle back to my grade school because my only formal training I've had in music is playing in grade school. I played percussion and I played all the way up into the marching band. I was in a four bass drum line in the marching band through high school.
Oh wow.
So when I first went to North Carolina, maybe a year after I first went out there in 2006, I went to the Mount Airy Fiddlers Convention for the first time, and I met this an elder lady who was from Mars Hill, and she gave me a set of bones, and she told me she thought that I should learn them because they're part of the tradition, and so I carried them with me, and she showed me how to do them, and I started to play them. Actually, I got a lesson during that same Mount Airy from Matt Kinman. He actually gave me a lesson, and he showed me this one move that Matt Kinman can bounce the bones off his knee in this one particular way that I've never learned how to do, which always drives me crazy. But yeah, Matt Kinman showed me a bit, and I actually met a fellow at the Black Banjo Gathering in 2005 named Cliff Irvin. He was out of Seattle, Washington, and he was an African American sculptor. He made wood sculptures, but he made his own bones as well. He was originally from Texas, though, I believe, and then I think he was out in Seattle after that. But I got to spend some time with him, and then another fellow named Michael Baytop, who played with Archie Edwards in the Washington D.C. area. I got to spend some time with Michael Baytop, and each of these bones players told me something different about playing the bones. And Michael Baytop told me his mentor, a fellow named Mr. Bones. He said that Mr. Bones taught him to play bones with any type of music. And Mr. Bones would busk next to the jukebox in town, and he would have people put a nickel into the slot, and he would play bones with the radio or the jukebox or whatever pop record, whether it was, Prince or Michael Jackson for the 80s or whatever, it was anything. And that was something Michael always told me, just to play any type of music. And Cliff and Matt, I learned to play a little bit of old time music with the bones. And as I got deeper into the history, I started to look into some of the imagery around the minstrel shows, and I happened to notice that a lot of the pictures showed these bones players. Of course, they're exaggerated, but they showed them with their hands up in the air. And up to that point, I hadn't ever seen many bones players play beyond, sort of like, I don't know, like a rock'em sock'em robot sort of position where it's kind of right in the front.
Yeah.
And so I tried it out and I thought it was great. And so I then found that uh, as a percussionist, I could then access a three-dimensional rhythm uh, orbit when I played the bones. And so as I played different types of music, I started to experiment with different ways that the rhythm could, uh, create a sense of tension as well as harmony within any type of group or any type of music. And I started experimenting with that, especially once we started to do a lot of the music from the late 1800s. A lot of that early banjo music is just tailor made for the sound of the bones and the banjo playing together.
Oh
So
yeah.
when you hear the two instruments together, it's easy to see why the music became so popular, in spite of the grotesque and horrific parts of that part of the musical tradition. You can see why musically it made sense to people and why they were so drawn to it, because it is so there's just a lot of room for improvisation and syncopation in ways we would now think of as part of jazz. But we have to think of, at one point before jazz existed, old time music had its own version of this sort of ultra syncopation that just really blew people's minds. And so I started to think about the music in that way and started to pick up little tidbits here and there. Or if I heard a field recording of a bones player, like J.C. Burris, for example, Sonny Terry's nephew, a great bones player, I just started to grab ideas from all of them. And and then, of course, as I went along, I started to put a little something of my own in it, which is part of the tradition as well. Uh, Let me think. The quills and the fife, that was something that Mike Seeger uh, got me interested in. First, I had heard the recordings of Henry Ragtime Texas Thomas. I think I might have heard him on the Anthology of American Folk Music. I heard Fishin' Blues. And after I heard those quills, I just had tried to figure out how I could get my hands on something even close to that. Out in Arizona, I really couldn't find anything like that. But when I went to the Black Banjo Gathering, I saw Mike Seeger and I heard him play the song Tennessee Dog, which he plays on the quills and the banjo. And so I asked him about it, and he got me in touch with an Andean musician who made the quills that Mike would play. And I started to learn the quills and started to play all those styles of music, Henry Thomas and any other types, Sid Hemphill and Joe Patterson. Those are the three main quills players that were recorded in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And so I started to work on those styles just because they were so rare, and I just love the fact they reached into world music and they reached into a much broader spectrum of American music, and so I was drawn to those types of artists, and I started to learn their styles and imitating it in some degree. I don't do them exactly note for note. I've never tried to be that type of musician, but if I could get the feeling and the spirit, I knew that that would be something that would really blow an audience's mind, because most times people haven't even heard nor experienced music like this that's over 100 years old, if
Yeah.
not more.
Yeah, that's what I love about it, man. And it's an awesome thing that you've sort of involuntarily or subliminally devoted your life to, is just like playing this music and keeping the stuff out there and learning all these. Like while you're sitting here talking about the quills, I'm thinking, how many people even have ever seen somebody do that? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that started to dawn on me as I started to learn the music as I went along. And that's what made me become a professional musician compared to being just a fan of music. I was interested in expanding the scholarship and also starting to play that music out. To play that music live, it gave people this. Um, I don't know how to describe it. It's the audiences really were just so glad to hear some of the old time music, because so much of the music now is even more so than when I first started, is now processed, and you barely hear instruments
yeah.
on on a lot of the pop music. And 15 years ago that wasn't that so much. You heard a lot of rock bands, but at least they had a guitar or a bass, or there were even drums.
Mm-hmm.
But I noticed that people are moved by just seeing actual physical organic music,
Yeah.
and that in of itself can really knock people out. And so that for me was an indicator that I should try my luck in being a professional with it, because that was a worthy goal for me, to be able to at least help put just an extra chapter in the precursor of American roots music. And so as I traveled along, I kept telling the stories and finding new information and connecting with record collectors and scholars and institutions. And, yeah, like, Billy, between 2005 and 2012 with the group, I stopped off at every public archive and ethnomusicological archive that I could on tour, and just chatted with the people over there. No intention of doing a project or anything. I just did that on my time off. And so I gained so much information that all of a sudden I turned around and realized I had this great collection of music and archival material that it then turned into its own sort of thing. So then I started working with the Southern Folk Life Collection, and that led me to working with the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian and everything like that. And it's a beautiful thing. Again, these places that I really championed as beautiful institutions that got me into the music, all of a sudden I was able to uh, help represent them in different forms or another. And to me, that's like feeding the music that fed me, and that's righteous in my book.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And congrats on all that, and and all you've worked your ass off to get where you're at, and been a lot of places and done a lot of amazing things. And are you a father now?
I am, and my daughter's now 2.5 years old. I was singing, funny enough, you mentioned Goodbye Old Paint. I was singing that song so much at one point, and when my wife and I uh, saw that we were going to have a daughter, she asked me what I should name her, and I said, well, let's name her Cheyenne, and that name stuck. And
Ah,
yeah, but like all multifaceted things, though, we named her with an A instead of a second E on Cheyenne. So she's not named after Cheyenne, Wyoming necessarily, but she's actually that's a Guamanian spelling, because my wife she's she grew up in Guam, and so it's a double faceted name for Cheyenne the song, and then also Cheyenne representing her family. And Cheyenne Love, her middle name, that's also my one of my family name on my wife's family. So Cheyenne Love, Kennard Flemons.
right on, man. Well, I'm sure that's keeping you busy and fulfilled and everything. It's kind of might even be nice to not have to be on the road right now.
It in some ways it has been nice to be off the road in a general sense, because of course you know how it is, Billy. You know this, when you're off the road, it doesn't necessarily mean you stop working.
Hmm.
You're preparing for the next tour most of the time, and just to have finally, after 15 years myself, to have just a little bit of time to say like, wow, I don't have something I have to plan and not put that energy out, has been, it's been good in terms of mental health, and in terms of just relaxation. You know, it's like
Yeah.
the wear and tear on the body and all that type of stuff. It's been a lot, and my family travels with me, so it's also been nice to finally have some home time with the family. And you know, my daughter's not quite old enough to where we're facing the same things that are happening with people needing to transition their kids out of school and all that type of stuff. But
Hmm.
we're trying to keep a nice you know, nice home life going, and so that's been good. And she listens to a lot of music, as you can imagine. She toots on the harmonica here and there. You know, she's been, it's been really a really a fun time to be a father. You know, it's but it's definitely been it's been a different experience. It's a whole new adventure, I'll say.
Absolutely. You know, also kind of maybe a bit of a scary time as well.
Oh yeah, well, you know, in all sort of uncertainties, it's always scary to think that you're you know, you got to always think about your children and your family, and you know that's a thing too. It's you know, that's in the back of our minds as well. But yeah, thankfully we've been, you know, we've been able to just maneuver as best as we can, just like kind of like everybody else, you know. And it, the one thing that, in, again, with all that being said, it has been good to be able to take a moment and reflect a little bit of on what I've been able to do personally, in a way that I don't think I would have been able to do if I had had the time to myself. And that's something that I think, if I were to find a silver lining, that would be what I would look toward, is just having had a little extra moment for reflection time. Because of course, you know, you know, it seems like just yesterday we saw each other, but it's been years, and that's kind of the way that life is a lot of times. And so for me, you know, I always try to look back and see what you know, see what I can find within the precedents in history, and try to create cultural memory and be able to spread that cultural memory out, because that's really what we need more than ever. Because again, if technology is going to become more a part of all of our lives, having cultural memory that is not specifically related to that technology is going to be more important than ever, because people just are going to need to be able to remember. Because at one point, you had a society, you know, for example, like in old time music, you had a specific groups that were advocates for a certain type of music, and they held a story that was a part of the development of their community. And now with technology, there are so many different schools of thought that can be opened at one time. Now's the time when we need cultural memory to bring us all back together in some sort of way. You know, it's always good to have discussion, but we always need, at the end of the day, it's all about making sure we get together and we can find the places where we meet compared to the places where we're split apart, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I just came in. I got poison ivy all up my legs and mosquito bites and shit because I've been out in the woods for the last couple nights camping, fishing, kayaking, sleeping in the woods. It was, for a minute there, I almost forgot about all the bullshit that's going on, and felt really good, and just to kind of get off my phone and stuff, for a couple days, and it's important to kind of just do that every once in a while, like you're saying, get together and play some tunes, and uh, yeah, we can't forget about that.
Absolutely, and it's easy to feel that you don't have time to do it, and I hope that in these moments here, people are remembering that you have to, you know, now plan those extra moments and really schedule it in. Even if you got to schedule it like a business meeting, just to say I'm going to go to the park, you gotta hold to it, because these are times where, that little moment, that little relaxation time, that little reflection time is gonna, it'll make or break you 15 years from now. You'll be like, man, if only I had done
Yep.
for relaxation time. And that's something I had to learn the hard way myself when I was touring. I learned that you got to work hard and then relax hard.
Yeah.
You have to you have to force that relaxation time, because if you put 250 days in on the road, those that I don't know 115 days, you gotta like really drive it home to get some relaxation time.
It gets to a point where you're over functioning,
Yeah.
and you want to keep it going, you want to keep the wheels on the road, you want to keep the fire hot, and it's also just habit. Like, this is how I've lived for the last little while, and and then all of a sudden you got this chunk of time off. It's like, oh, that'll be a nice little chunk of time off, and then your booking agent goes, hey, we got this really cool thing there.
Hmm.
Well, that was my time off. Okay, yeah, let's do the gig. Okay, all of a sudden you don't have any time off, and then later on in the year you're going, shit,
That's right.
what have
That's
I,
right.
what have I
All
done?
all of a sudden you're like, it's the fall, and I haven't slept in 2.5 weeks. Wow. It's really funny with that type of stuff where, yeah, you really gotta just you have to find that balance, whatever it is,
I've
and
I've been learning how to say no and kind of set
yeah.
set boundaries in that way with, like, in the beginning of, especially like back when I first met you and stuff. Once I was first getting going, I mean, I told my agent, book me as many gigs as you can. Like,
Mhm.
if it's possible, let's do it. You know,
That's right.
and then
Well, and
after doing
that,
that for a couple years, it's like, okay, let's rethink what I said a couple years ago. We're gonna need some chunks of time off now to survive.
oh yeah, and it's an interesting, constant whirlwind, trying to figure out how to get some sort of regularity within the big scope of things. Because the other thing that's tough too is when you have a lot of time off. If you're used to doing 1,000 things a day, and then all of a sudden you have 2 things a day, trying to get yourself, again, when I say relax hard, it's like really, really, chaining yourself to the couch and forcing yourself to sit down for 2 hours. That can be sometimes the most challenging thing to do, is that you have 2 things to do today, but you're used to doing 1,000, and you still want to cover 1,000 things to be done in the day, when at home there's only so much. And yeah, it's always an interesting thing. So it's, for me, I've been, of course, trying to reflect and think about how to take things very slow. I've also been focusing on projects that I've been needing for a while. Of course, the LP collection is always a constant garden that needs tending, and I've recently broken it down a whole other set of categorization, which is makes it easier for me to find certain LPs. And I found some really great stuff recently, like some great, I don't know, some great pickers like Lou Childry. I found a great Starday record of Lou Childry, as well as some beautiful Delmore Brothers on County Records. What else do I got here that was recent? Boy, um, found a really great Fiddlin' Doc Roberts recently, and let's see. And then one other one I actually found recent that I'll mention here is a beautiful set that came out on Document Records called "Searching for Secret Heroes," and it's the very first documentary solely focused on the blues, made by Sam Charters and his wife Ann. And it's a beautiful package. And yeah, just been taking some time to really invest in some of the recording, revisiting some of my favorites, and then also coming up with new material, because that's how you keep the fire going for when eventually life goes into some sort of new phase of interaction.
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
it's some. We were out in California playing this festival somewhere, and I think Bob Weir was on stage, and there's this old cat that came up to me. This old California hippie dude, and he stopped and talked to me for a while. And a lot of fans sometimes, they'll bring me like some weed or something. But what this guy was saying is, he was like, you know how your fans do that? He goes, what you need to do is get on the mic or get on Facebook or whatever and tell them that you're really into old vinyl. And your fans will start to bring you all these old vinyls, and then you can listen to the songs on there. Many of the songs which you've never heard and are great songs, you might be able to throw them in your set. I'm just saying. So that's what this old guy said to me, and I was like, man, he's right. If I just put it out there that I'm into old vinyl, and especially old American music and old time music and stuff like that, um, maybe some people might, who knows, if they're just going through Goodwill one day, they might find something cool and bring it to a show or something. So I'm just putting that out there.
Absolutely. Well, that was something early on when I first started playing guitar. There was a guy that saw me playing and he said, kid, if you learn 120 songs, you could start becoming a good guitar player. And I ran with that. And then it just kind of kept going after that because after I got to 120, I was like, well, why not go to 500? And then I just kept on plowing ahead. And that's one of the things as well that's beautiful to be able to play and reinterpret some of the old time songs in the old time styles as well. It's you just don't hear it a lot. And then also for me, I tend to get a lot of record collectors in the crowd, and they're just as particular as I can be when it comes to listening to the old records. And that's another part of the audience that I try to reach when I do my music, is I try to reach some of the record collectors that know the music really well, because
Hmm.
something too is when you get one of the great 78 collectors or someone who says, I've been collecting this music all my life, and they just say, yeah, and you do it right, thank you. That's really lets you know. It's almost like getting an appraisal from someone who knows antique furniture or something like that. They can see that you took the time to learn the particular subtleties that make it. Like one time, like one of the songs on my album Prospect Hill that I've done for years is but they got it fixed right on, which is one of my favorite hokum songs from Georgia Tom Dorsey. And I met a guy by the name of Andy Hurlbut, and no, Andy Halibut is his name, and he's a gospel music historian. And he he noticed the way that I sang, but they got it fixed right on, because there's a certain way that Dorsey sang. Like the chorus is, but they got it fixed, ain't no doubt. Nobody knows what the song's about. Too bad that the news got out, but they got it fixed right on. And he noticed the way that I said doubt instead
Yeah.
of saying doubt, and saying doubt, because he kind of had sort of that Dorsey had that sort of way. He is his other song, "If You See My Savior," is like that. If you see my Savior, tell him that you saw me. He had a very old timey sort of gospely voice, and this fellow noticed that, and he said, "I like the way that you said doubt, because that sounded just like Dorsey used to sing it. He would sing that doubt." And I
Yeah.
said, "Thank you," and that's, as a musician, those are the sort of goals that are, again, artistically satisfying, but also personally satisfying when an audience member comes to you and, based on whatever experience they have, they can tell you that your music did something for them. I have other times, my song "Too Long I've Been Gone." I've had actually quite a few veterans come up to me and tell me how much they love that song, "Too Long I've Been Gone," which
Hmm.
I hadn't specifically written it as that sort of song, but the words, for whatever reason, resonated with different people that have been in the service and, have dealt with PTSD. And I've had long conversations with several of these different veterans as I've been at the shows. And it was very moving for me to hear their stories, because they told me how a song that I wrote about, actually, some about being on the road, and some of the times that when you get wore down, it meant something completely different for them that helped them along. Which, again, artistically, that's very satisfying to know that you can create these spaces where the songs can mean multiple things, many different things, and I've always tried to write my songs like that. I try to write my songs like, I want someone to actually cover them, because I don't try to write them so they sound always like me, but it make them so they're open enough so someone else might hear something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's something that I always think about those things. And it also helps you go to work too. Sometimes when you get tired at that gig, if you know that you can find someone that's going to appreciate some aspect of your music, that also helps every day. Because as you know, Billy, it's sometimes it ain't easy to do some of the gigs, not because of the audience, but because of everything else.
Yeah, all the stuff it took to get there, and everything, and all the hard travel, and you didn't get any sleep, and you've been on 3 trains and 2 airplanes today, and you finally get to the gig, and then you break a string, and oh man, and and but when somebody does come up after the show and say, hey, this song really means a lot to me because I just lost my brother, and this, or something like that, and it's like, and they really mean it, and you can tell that it actually touched them in a way. That's the best kind of reward that you could ever get for doing what we do.
Yeah, without a doubt, and it's going to be interesting to see for me. I'll be interested to see how, as everyone moves forward, how cultural memory will begin to reverberate again outward with people. Whether it's through them expressing themselves through art and music, or if they decide to, any number of things. I'll be interested to see how that continues to move forward. But it's been nice. I've gotten some people. I've gotten a couple of people that have mentioned that they really enjoyed the album, and I've been just really pleased that my music has resonated with folks, because that's one of the things I try to think about, trying to make music that would appeal to people, that in the way that it appeals to me as well, which is I couldn't tell you why I like a song, but I can tell you when I do, you know, and it doesn't matter what it is. It can be any type of music, but if it moves me, then I'm moved
Hmm.
and I'm into it. And that's one of the things I try to do for my music as well. I try to put interesting little tidbits into the arrangements and into the lyrics and then the styles of music, and try to get the audience to react in a certain way, and get inspired in one form or another,
Yeah.
and that's a beautiful thing, and I'll be interested to see how that continues moving forward. I'll be interested to see how both the audience and the artist can maneuver.
Yeah. It's interesting to see some of those, like, I don't know, just any mainstream or bigger song where you hear banjo or anything like that. It's kind of cool to see that stuff creep in a little bit, and I wonder. It makes me stoked when a band like Mumford and Sons or something is super successful, and they play somewhat of Americana songs and stuff like that, and it's just it's really cool. But you know, do you have any, like, if you're just flipping through the radio and you hear most of the stuff? I mean, does modern music really do anything for you?
It really matters what type of modern music. I
Yeah.
would say the most consistent type of modern music that I've gotten into is world music of different types. I'll mention just a great act I happened to see at a show several years back. I went to this wonderful world music festival called WOMAD, and it was out in Budapest, and it was acts from all over the world, and I showcased at this thing, and it was just a beautiful time. Too big of an experience for me to try to even describe the whole thing. Being on the Blue Danube River, and checking this all the different acts out. But I saw one act called Vadu Game, and he was from Benin, Togo, and this fellow his music was a combination of James Brown, Jimi Hendrix, Bootsy Collins, and Santana all combined into a Benin Togo sort of beautiful Afro beat rock sound. I mean, it was pretty amazing. I saw the poster for the fellow. So if you look the guy up, you'll see probably a poster of him with his mask on. And I mean, it was such an intriguing image when I was just walking into the venue. I was like, I have to see this fellow Vadu game, and he didn't disappoint me. And his music was so good. And I guess a year after I saw him, I found a copy of one of his LPs at Mississippi Records in Portland,
Oh yeah.
and they were playing it on the house speaker. And I said, wait a second, that's Vadu game. And I went over there, and they didn't even hear side two. I took it right off of the bought it, and so that's what I've consistently found to be the most intriguing to me is a lot of the world music. But let me think of what else, what I've been listening to. Oh, gosh, let's see.
I guess I was asking more in terms of like mainstream stuff.
Oh well, well, let me think. Yeah, the mainstream has been tricky for me because it's been hard with the digital age to be able to get a true finger on the pulse with the new stuff. See, I tend to like people like Tuba Skinny. That's someone that that's a group that I really get behind. I was always a fan of Charles Bradley before he passed away.
Yeah.
The California Feet Warmers are another group that I really enjoy. Let me think of who else, but let me think. Those are kind of old timey acts still. Yeah, now that I got a kid, I've it's been tough for me to find the new acts. It's hard for me to stay on the pulse of the newest roots acts going on. You know,
Yeah. I just live in Nashville, and a lot of times when I flip through the radio, I'm just like, damn, this this has gotten really bad.
yeah, well, it's interesting. Like 'cause, one of the things in me making a lot of music, I decided years ago, especially during the year of the folk singer, I just decided to take a very concerted stance on doing music that sounds very much in line with certain ways that genres are classified. And so I've really experimented with that idea. Like bluesy songs are kind of have a blues sound to them, but I'll come up with a new way of mixing it up. But I've really spent a lot of time really focusing on those forms and trying to make the forms very recognizable but be very different at the same time. Like my song "Steel Pony Blues." It's kind of a song that has a John Hurt type of feel, but I kind of kept it a little bit more along the lines of people like Boo Hanks and people I knew in North Carolina. Um, and then I made it a cowboy themed song. So I kind of experimented with the idea of what North Carolina music means as it migrates out west. And but it's recognizable in terms of the picking pattern and some of the melody sounds familiar, but I tried to make it real different in terms of making it an original song. So it's always an experimentation when you do that type of stuff.
Hmm. Speaking of picking pattern, I really I really love watching you play guitar, and you have a really interesting right hand technique. Did you pick that up anywhere, or is that like is there? Because I when I was a little kid, I watched my dad play, and the way that I learned how to hold my pick was I just looked right at his hand, and I tried to make mine just look the same, and it's like, okay, when he holds his pick, his other three fingers are sticking out like that. So that's what my dad does. That's what I'll do. But you know, you have an interesting way of kind of flicking the top strings, with like a downstroke and using your thumb and stuff. But where'd you pick that up, or is it just kind of the way that you ended up learning how to play, or?
Well, let me think. Let me think. It's a couple of different things. So in terms of doing the sort of the thumb pattern stuff, like the low bass note stuff, I tend to do the bass snapping. I first started really incorporating that after I found a video of Sam Chapman. It was on a DVD from Stephen Grossman. It was Legends of Country Blues Guitar Volume 2. And they had a video of Sam Chapman doing the song Big Road Blues. and he had this really wicked bass snap that he was doing on it, and I wanted to incorporate that. So I had started playing a little bit of that style along with some of the other things that I had learned early on in my guitar playing. And when I started playing string band music, a, a lot of the Joe Thompson songs are one chord. So it was driving me crazy just strumming just one chord the whole time. So I started to figure out how to do counterpoint bass patterns next to the fiddle and banjo.
Mm.
And that's part of the foundation of the chocolate drop sound, is that I came up with this way of playing lower counterpoint rhythmic parts with bass notes. And so that's how I started really bringing that into my style. And so as I play solo, I tend to do a little bit of Piedmont picking, but at the same time, I'm self-taught when it comes to actually playing the guitar.
Hmm.
So my style, I'm able to intersperse. Like when I first started, there was a guy named Gavin Weiser. He was an old friend. He was out in Arizona. He was a bassist in a band, and he was an older guy. He played a lot of John Prine and stuff like that, but he didn't play with a pick, and he strummed with two fingers and his thumb with no pick. And so that's where I first started to strum like that. But that was before I started learning to finger pick. So I learned how to strum. With a flat pick, I kept dropping it in the sound hole, and it drove me crazy. And so I found the thumb pick, and I just bought it at the store, not knowing that thumb picks were a thing. And I liked the feel. And then the first time I saw a picture of Lightning Hopkins and Leadbelly, I noticed they had a thumb pick too. So I was like, great, I'm on the right path with
Hmm.
this, because it's functional. I never could figure out finger picks, so I just never bothered. But I've been able to just make a nice callus just strumming on it.
Yeah.
The other, and then when I was 18, I saw Dave Van Ronk. About I don't know, he passed away about 6 months after that performance. He played in Phoenix, 2001, and so I also became obsessed with Dave Van Ronk. So I tend to have that same finger pattern too, holding the two fingers down and picking with two fingers and the thumb. And, that's how I did most John Hurt and Mance Lipscomb and all those types of styles. And then when I started playing clawhammer banjo, that was sort of the final bit, because I started learning how to do a clawhammer guitar style when I played in open tuning. And so then I incorporate that into my standard guitar tuning as well. So it's sort of a little bit of all three of those things. And being a big fan also of Chet Atkins and Merle Travis, I also I'm not quite as precise as those type of players, but I tend to do a lot of passing chord changes that are symbolic of the Muhlenberg sound. And so I tend to incorporate some of that when I'm doing my leads, as well as my a lot of my soloing. I tend to do within that sort of framework pattern,
Hmm.
and that easily switches into chunking style of jazz guitar. If I happen to be doing a jazz song, I can chunk away or something like that. So yeah, so there was that, and then finally when I started to learn the plectrum banjo, that also changed my guitar style as well, because then I learned how to do play all the way up the neck with the different inversions of the chords, and so I can intersperse my guitar style with any of these things just free willy nilly. So I tend to do that in my shows too, because you got to give you got to give you got to make some people run for their money if you can. If you're
Yeah,
out there,
mix it
if
up.
you're out, I'm not I don't cut heads like I used to when I was really young, but I try to at least inspire somebody with the and I arrange my songs so that I have free flowing improvisation sections that I work within, and that also helps me gig to gig not get bored of my own songs,
Oh yeah.
because I make a section that's like, this is where you pick it hard, and then I can really come up with something interesting, and that's also exciting for the audience. The audience doesn't want to feel like you can always make it every time. You kind of want to make them seem like you're going to fall, but you pull them back and say, we got it.
Absolutely. Man, well, it sure is good talking to you, Dom, and I hope you're faring well, and be thinking of you and your family, and hopefully I'll see you soon out there.
Yeah, Billy, and again, congratulations on all the things you've been able to accomplish so far. And I know that you got a lot of years of great playing in your career, and I'm going to be there to support you along the way. And man, I'll be thinking about you as well. And all the best to the family. And yeah, we'll talk again soon. Don't worry, we'll be picking soon.
Absolutely, man. Well, take care, and thanks for taking the time to chat a little bit. And man, I'll see you around the block.
Sounds good. Anytime.
All right, man. See ya.
Well, that's Dom Flemons, folks. What an absolute treasure trove of musical knowledge. That man knows more about roots and old-timey music than anyone I have ever met, by a long shot. We really do appreciate Dom getting on the phone today. Sounded like he had a great time. I know I certainly did. Looking forward to catching up with Dom one day real soon. Tune in next time when Billy gets on the line with Hillary Gleason. Hillary's a longtime friend of ours and has been a staple in the music scene for many, many years. We're really big fans and supporters of her latest focus, Backline. Backline is a much-needed mental health outreach organization focusing on musicians and music industry workers. These folks are out there doing great things for great people in a time of great uncertainty. Be sure to tune in for this one. You're going to want to hear what Hillary has to say. For now, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. We'll be back real soon. Bye now.